Welcome, welcome. This is the Enlightenment Show, and I'm your host, Laurie Schoenfeld. This is where Chicken Soup for the Soul meets the artist way with Nancy Drew. Our guest today is Jennifer Coburn, author of Cradles of the Reich. We're going to be chatting with her all about her new release today and a cause that she believes in. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It is so fantastic to have you here with us today as well. What is something that has been calming to you this week?
Calming to me? Well, that's a great question because this week I have been on the road promoting Cradles of the Reich, and it is a breakneck schedule of getting from one engagement to the other. But what is really calming is meeting readers who've had the chance to go to read Cradles of the Reich and them telling me that they learned something, they got something out of the book, they appreciate the research that I put in. And I was working on this book for years wondering, A, will it ever see the light of day? And B, will people like it? So it has been really calming for me to connect with readers and hear that that it is something that resonates with them. So that's been calming.
Mm-hmm. It is a very powerful book, which I mentioned to you before the show, that I'm really, really excited to get into the hands of other readers as well, as there's a lot of history and depth and a great conversation to be had from this book. So thank you for writing and sharing it with us.
It's truly an honor. Thank you.
Can you share with our listeners and viewers what Cradle of the Reich is all about?
Yeah, sure. Cradles of the Reich is about three very different German women who meet at a Nazi Lebensborn breeding home. And the breeding home was part of Heinrich Himmler's, he was Hitler's second in command. Himmler had a plan to create 2 million new babies, racially valuable babies for the Reich. And it was called the Lebensborn Society, operated in three ways. One, it arranged sexual liaisons between German women and SS officers. Two, it opened maternity homes mainly for unwed pregnant German women, some married, but mostly unwed. And three, it was a kidnapping program where German soldiers identified blonde-haired, blue-eyed children in countries that the Nazis invaded and brought them back to Germany for what they called Germanization and then for adoption. So that's a real program. And I brought three fictional characters into this world to explore the program and answer the questions that I had about the Lebensborn Society. But to do so through the more intimate lens of women's stories and women's relationships.
Mm-hmm. I can just tell from how you described that there's a lot of passion and excitement that was backing behind that research. What kind of research did you do as you were diving in to learn more about what is in your novel?
Oh gosh, that is such a great question. So when I started writing Cradles of the Reich, I knew that I would have to learn about the invasions of different nations, different countries that Germany occupied. I knew I would need to learn about the Battle of the Bzura, the non-aggression pact between Germany and the Soviets. What I didn't know, and what came up on every single page, was the need to research mundane cultural details, like when a man puts on his pants in Germany, 1939. Does he button, snap, or zipper them? So how I did research like that was calling on subject matter experts, like a food historian, a historian of propaganda, people who had expertise in Reich culture. And also, I was fortunate enough to find a former member of the Hitler Youth. Now, it's weird for me as a Jewish person to say I was fortunate to find a 90-year-old man who had been in the Hitler Youth. He was actually in the Deutsche Jungen, which is the baby arm of the Hitler Youth. And he was 7 years old. He did not perpetrate any violence, but he went to their camps and studied military drills. And why I consider this such an important part of my research was that he told me what it was really like to be an ordinary German citizen during that time. He could have said to me, I was 7 years old, but I understood right from wrong. My moral compass steered me straight, but he didn't. He said, I loved Hitler, and here's why. And the reason that that relationship was so important to me and his candor was so valuable is it allowed me to crawl into the skin of Nazi sympathizers and people who were indifferent to the plight of Jews during the war, so that I could create authentic characters who were multi-layered and nuanced, so that it wasn't just a bad Nazi. I wanted you to read the character of Hilda, who is a Nazi sympathizer, and I wanted you, the reader, to ask not what's wrong with Hilda, but what happened to Hilda? How did she come to believe this? So my relationship with Rolf Schulz was integral in this research process, as well as meeting other older Germans who told me what their lives were like, what their gestures were like. Would they roll their eyes at their mother? Would they toss a coin into a fountain to make a wish? Little details that help me create a world that is historically accurate for readers.
What I love about what you said, Jennifer, there was a lot that I loved there, but just the changing of the lens with the psychology behind what you knew before you went into the project versus how you are now after having those conversations and seeing those different perspectives of other people. What were a few things that you feel were takeaways that you learned more in depth after you had those conversations?
After I had those conversations, I realized just how young the indoctrination process began. Babies were initiated to the Nazi Party at 2 weeks old. As toddlers, they heard stories like Der Gilfpilz, which is a children's book that translates to the poisonous mushroom. And it teaches young children that Jewish people, much like mushrooms, may look harmless, but they are poisonous to the Volk. So I have always, as a Jewish woman and as a Jewish girl, I had always wondered, how does this happen? How do people learn to hate a whole group, how do people learn to hate Jews? How do people learn to hate anybody? And I really grew to understand how deep and how broad the propaganda machine reached. And that's not to make excuses, and that's not to say other people were able to see through it, and other people were able to say, this is nonsense, I know right from wrong, and they joined the resistance. So I'm not making excuses, but I grew in my understanding for how this could happen. And the reason that it was so important for me to do this and not to say, oh, those bad people over there way long ago did this terrible thing, I wanted to see, what are the early warning signs of the rise of fascism? How can we prevent this from happening again by seeing red flags, for knowing what it looks like?
Yes. We have a few comments coming in for you, Jennifer. Hi,
Pardon me.
Allison. She says, "Good morning, authors." Good morning,
Hi.
Allison. Thank you so much for being here. And she also put, "Oh, I learned that from Man in the High Castle." Yes.
So
Yes.
did I, Allison. That's how I first learned about the Lebensborn Society. So I'm sure you remember the episode where the woman mentions to Joe that she was bred through this program, and it was, devastating news to him. And I thought this is a fictional element of the show, because you remember the episode where they blew up the Statue of Liberty. Well, that never happened. So I figured, they made that up. But my curiosity got the better of me. I Googled the Lebensborn Society, and the first image I saw was a black and white photo of a row of nurses in an almost military formation holding these bundles of
Mhm.
babies. And that's when I realized the Lebensborn Society was real.
That moment, I'm sure, Jennifer, I want to pause for a second. When you saw that picture and you're like, wait a minute, I thought this was fiction,
Mhm.
and now there's reality to it. How did you feel in that moment with that realization?
It was chilling. It
Mm,
was chilling to realize that there really was a top secret program that operated for 10 years. What was I don't know if it's equally, but what was also chilling is that I had never heard of this before. And I'm 50 some years old, and I've never heard about this horrific part of
mm,
of history. Why is that? So that was a long night. I started digging and digging and digging, and somewhere around sunrise, I decided I wanted to read a historical novel about the Lebensborn. But what I found was that while there were many nonfiction books, there were no novels.
mhm,
So thought about it for a few weeks, and then I decided that I would write the book that I wanted to read with a book club.
mhm. You have three strong female protagonists. You have Gundi, Hilda, and Irma. What are a few of the characteristics that you love most about each one of them?
So it's important for readers to know that these three characters were crafted in a way so that they are representative of the three choices that non-Jewish German women had in Germany 1939. They are the resistor, which is Gundi. Gundi is a 20-year-old university student who um, is what the Germans considered perfection. She's tall, she has blonde hair and blue eyes. What they don't know is that she's secretly pregnant with a Jewish man's baby. And she's part of the resistance. Then there's Nurse Irma. She is the bystander. She's just kind of keeping her head down and trying to make it through the war. She actually feels good about serving as a nurse in the Reich. She's serving her country, and she's helping these young pregnant women. Then there's Hilda. She is the true believer in the Nazi cause. She is what the Germans called a real Hitler girl. And she's excited to be part of the Lebensborn Society, and she is honored to be pregnant with a high ranking SS officer's baby. So, those are the three choices really that German women had. And I knew that if I put them together with their very different needs and wants, that sparks would fly and that they would come into direct conflict.
Mm-hmm. Out of those three main characters, who was the one that you begin to get to know and write about first?
I wrote about Gundi first, and I wrote, I would have to say I wrote about them simultaneously. Some writers would break it up and have each uh, protagonist have her own story arc. I alternated, and I wanted to do that so each story could weave into each other, and so that things could be happening, milestones could be happening for each of the women, but in a very different
Mhm.
way. And I wanted them to have these parallel experiences or interwoven experience so that they could change the trajectory of one another's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I started with Gundi first, and then I went on to crazy Hilda, and then wrote about Irma.
You just recently discovered something. Would you like to share with our listeners and viewers what you discovered?
Yes, thank you for asking. So I live in San Diego, and the San Diego Union Tribune did a story on Cradles of the Reich. The next day, I got an email from a 77-year-old man who said that he was a Lebensborn baby. And I said, well, what do you mean? What is that? And he said, my birth mother signed up and lined up to have sex with Nazi officers, to have a baby for Hitler. And that's what they called it, having a baby for Hitler. And his birth father was a Nazi pilot. So that is pretty much the definition of the breeding arm of the Lebensborn Society. So it was really interesting to meet him.
So did you have an actual encounter? And so you got the email and you went and visited with him after that email?
No, I called him, and I was having a pre-launch event for my friends and family in San Diego. And I said, you know what, John, come to the event, bring your documentation. And he did. He did, and he is 100% legit. I had at this party a Holocaust survivor's son and a Holocaust historian, and they both looked over his documentation with great interest, and they said, this guy is completely legitimate. He was conceived during the war and born after the war. So he is one of the last Lebensborn babies. And Lori, what I imagined, yeah, what I thought he would be doing now was, you know, sitting at home in his lederhosen and carving duck figurines out of wood. You know what he is? He's a surf shop owner, and he surfs every day. So go figure. Yeah.
That is awesome. Just the different pieces that you learn about people, again, from that perspective of what you think happened versus what you learn really is happening.
John was featured in a Washington Post article that ran last week about Cradles of the Reich and about the Lebensborn Society. I put the reporter Kathleen Parker in touch with him, and she vetted his documents as well. And it's really fascinating to meet someone who has this history and talk to him about how he feels about it.
Mm-hmm. How did he? What was some of the things that he did feel and share with you about figuring this out on his own POV?
So let me back up and tell you that several of the Lebensborn children who discover their heritage, and that's only 20% of them, 80% have died or will die not knowing that they are products of the Lebensborn Society. And their reactions vary from I don't care, I belong to the Schmitz, and that's that, and I'm not looking into it anymore, to a lot of pain, where they go through great lengths to reconnect with their birth family, meet them, and at the reunion need a translator because they no longer speak the same language. So there are all of those reactions. John was just like, I think it's interesting where I come from. He had no guilt or shame, which is good because he did nothing wrong, but he doesn't carry any baggage from this, which I find amazing. I carry baggage from just about everything. So the fact that he has this this very interesting past that could make somebody feel like, oh my goodness, I have Nazi blood running through me, and this woman who wanted to have sex with Nazi officers, I would feel really conflicted at best. But he does no hand wringing. He goes out and hangs 10 every day and then waxes his board and goes on with his life. So good for him. I'll have what he's having, please.
I am right there with you. 'Cause, yeah, I'm an overthinker too. I think I would overthink the whole situation to death and feel all the feels and be very conflicted with you as well, Jennifer.
Well, and you and I would be in the wrong to do that, because
Mhm.
if we get hung up on what blood is running through my veins, I mean, hashtag irony, that's exactly what the Nazis were doing. They were saying this is
Mm.
good blood, this is bad blood. So that has been proven to be fake science. I mean, there are genetic components, like a pianist might have a child who's more apt to play piano, but also it's because you're living in the house playing the piano and providing lessons.
Right.
But so there is, there is nature, the nature component to the nature versus nurture debate, but I don't believe in evil blood and good
Mhm.
blood.
Absolutely. You've written multiple novels as well as contributed to anthologies. What have you learned on your journey from being a debut author to right now?
Oof, that's a good question. Um, I have, boy, I have learned that there are so many people and so many steps that go into making a book, that
Mm.
you are, as an author, you are not in this alone. You have your friends who read the book, editors who read the book, publicists who help you, bloggers, bookstore owners, people who just meet you at an event that help and talk about the book, that you would be wildly arrogant to think that this is you alone. It's almost embarrassing, Lori, that my name is the only one on the book, because there are about 50 people who worked so hard to get this book into the world, and I just appreciate all of them, and just feel so grateful that they believed in this book. So I've learned that it takes a big village to launch a book.
I love that you mentioned that because, yes, there's so many hands in the creative journey of, you know, one person moving you forward and you help move someone else forward. It's this beautiful domino effect of all contributing together to share in this beautiful creation that we each put together in our own way. What is something that you feel is a cause that you believe in right now?
Well, I am passionate about getting out the word about the Lebensborn Society, because it happened and we need to know about it. Women, I believe, should know our history and how our reproduction is politicized and commoditized, and how it has been done in the past, and how that may take form in the future. And if we know about our past, we are armed to
Mm.
fight against people who would use our bodies and our sexuality and our reproductivity for their own cause, which may
Mhm.
be in direct conflict with ours.
Yes, yes. Where would you direct our listeners and viewers of different places they could go to look more into that cause for themselves?
Well, gosh, there are so many. So if it's the Lebensborn Society, I would say start with Cradles of the Reich. And that sounds like really gross and self promotional, but I'll tell you why that is. Because I didn't start out wanting to write a historical novel. I just wanted to read a historical novel. And I had so many questions about this program, and my book aims to answer all of those questions for you.
Mhm.
Now, if you read the book and you say, like, well, I still didn't have some questions answered, there are about 15 really thorough nonfiction books about the Lebensborn Society. Then, if they want to zoom out even further and learn about Nazi culture as it related to as it related to population and childbirth. There's Hitler's Furies, which is about women in the Third Reich. There is Mothers in the Fatherland. I don't think I got that name right, but if you Google Mothers in the Fatherland, it's something very close to that. And there are several other books that are not coming to mind immediately about the unique role of motherhood and women. And if I have time, I'd love to tell you a quick story about how important mothers were, or how important mothers were made to feel in the Reich. Do we have time for that?
Yes, please. I would love to hear about that.
So at the end of World War I, the population rate in Germany had been on the decline, had started to decline and continued to for several decades. So the Nazi propaganda machine kicked into full gear in the mid-1930s, and they started to promote large families, children having 4 or more children, as a virtue. And they started calling these families child rich and awarding mothers who had 4 or more healthy children. They gave her a war medal called the Mutterkreuz, which is the Mother Cross. And a mother would receive this medal, if a bronze medal if she had 4 or more healthy children, a silver medal if she had 6 or more healthy children, and a gold medal for 8 or more healthy children. And I have pictures of the Mutterkreuz on my social media, Jennifer Coburn Books, on Instagram and Facebook. And women would wear these Mutterkreuz medals every day. And it was such a status symbol to wear this that when a member of the Hitler Youth, or the girls' arm of the Hitler Youth, the Bunderdeutsche Mädel, when they saw a woman wearing this, they had to stop and salute that woman as if she were the Führer himself. So they began teaching girls, young girls, that motherhood was the most important and patriotic role they had in the Reich. And they began seeing this with the older women wearing these crosses, and they were a doll in a baby carriage was shoved into their arms at age 2, and they went into training to become mothers and wives.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I got chills as you were talking about that. Wow, 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 wow.
I know, it was pretty disturbing.
I have to say, too, Jennifer, with your book, I didn't know a lot of what was going on that we've talked about today. I didn't know the depth, for sure, of what you had mentioned within your book and that you're sharing today. And so definitely a fantastic resource. I'm really grateful that you wrote this, honestly, because it helped me to be able to see a piece of history and understand it in a way that I didn't even know was going on.
Yeah.
That you've shed light on to today.
So I bet you that when you read that chapter where they go to a Mutterkreuz ceremony, I bet you thought I made that up. Which is why I put an author's note in the back, and I have social media posts called Fact or Fiction, where I say, Lori, I did not make this up. This is not an overactive imagination on my part. These are historical facts. So if there's anything you read in the book that seems just absolutely too bizarre to be true, check my social media, check the author's note, and you will see it is real.
And that's the shocking part too, Jennifer, because I think there were definitely parts when I was reading, it would be easier to say, wow, that seems fictionalized, because it is definitely shocking and hard to really allow yourself to emotionally be like, no, this really happened back then, but it did.
Yeah.
We're going to turn it to the inner child question segment. Are you ready? Okay. First question. When you were a kid, what was a place, or where was a place that you felt most safe?
Well, I felt very safe at home. I was lucky enough to have a very loving family. But the place that I really felt my most most like myself was Camp St. Regis, where I attended summer camp for 10 years from age 6 to 15. And that was in a little enclave on a bay in East Hampton. And we had sailing lessons and tennis. It was just so wonderful. And we were free. It was just this little village of children. The grown-ups were 16. So I loved it there, and I felt very safe.
Second question, if you were walking into a hat shop and you saw an array, an assortment of all different kinds of hats, which one would you pick and why?
I'd pick a cloche hat because I think they are beautiful, and I love the way they frame the face, and I love that era where women wore cloche hats. So I would actually grab two, one for me and one for my mother, so that we could match. My mother is the OG hat wearer. If you see her on my social media, you will never see her without a hat.
Mm-hmm. Does she have different, does she have a hat collection and wear a different hat every day, or does she have a favorite few hats that she wears consistently?
She has her everyday hat, and then she has several other hats, but she's a hat woman, and she's a goddess. I gotta say, my mom's 83 years old. She is chic. She is with it, and she is, I mean, the woman is amazing and looks amazing in a hat.
You're making me think of my grandma, because that's how I felt about my grandma before she passed. She was always had fancy shoes, like these fancy slippers, and she always had these gloves and looked so polished and just glamored with her hats, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Loved it. Third question, what is the oddest food combo that you've liked and tried, or you've just tried?
The oddest food combo?
The oddest or the weirdest food combo?
I try a lot of food combos, and I don't really consider any of them odd. And I'll tell you why, Lori. I grew up with my father had a very adventurous palate, and my mother's boyfriend took us to all these wonderful restaurants where they put a lot of very different foods in front of us, and I ate them all. And I am blessed and cursed to say that there's no food that I haven't enjoyed, and no food combos that I wouldn't eat or that I would consider odd. So, I mean, I don't know. I've never eaten ice cream and pickles, but I've also never been presented with ice cream and pickles. So I don't know is that enough of an answer for you?
Yes, I love that you have tried whatever's put in front of you and just went with it. That's amazing. Yeah. I love that. What's your favorite? Do you have a few favorite meals, or is it just like you really just enjoy the experience of food?
I love food. Mm-hmm. Much to my detriment, but I love seafood. I'm here in Delaware right now on a beautiful rainy day, and I'm overlooking the canal, and I'm going to find some shellfish. I love lobster, love shellfish. I lean toward Asian cuisine. I really like Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, Thai, Korean. Oh, do I love oh man, Lori, you just made me crave Korean short ribs. Those are good. Also not shellfish. So I like all food, and I lean towards seafood and Asian.
I want to have a buffet right now with you, Jennifer, and just have all the different foods you just mentioned and smell them and experience all that.
Buffets are the best because you can sample everything, and then you know what to order next time. Mm-hmm. Where do you live, Lori? Maybe we should get together.
I live in Utah, but I will travel for this buffet adventure with you, Jennifer.
Good. Let's do it. I live in San Diego. Not that far, but...
No. Yeah, we'll make it happen.
Okay.
Before we end today, what is some advice that you can give our listeners and viewers on living a creatively abundant life?
Okay. So this is advice that I will give with the caveat that I have not mastered this. This is something that I work on every day. And that is, don't compare your work in progress to somebody else's finished product. My cousin and my best friend are both recovering alcoholics. And in AA, there is a saying, don't compare your insides to someone else's outsides. And that really resonated with me because I know what a hot mess I am inside and how my anxiety is spinning it around constantly. And then I look at other people and I go, wow, they really have it together. This book that I'm reading that I picked up at a bookstore is so much better than my draft. And I have to say to myself, Jennifer, don't compare somebody else's final product with your work in progress. And that will take it down a notch and leave my brain room to create rather than perseverate.
Mm-hmm. That is fantastic advice and something I'm also working on every day too. Where can we find you if the listeners or viewers have any questions about their book or any of your future projects that you're working on?
Thank you. So I'm very active on Instagram and Facebook. My handle there is at Jennifer Coburn Books. You can also just reach out to me on my website, jennifercoburn.com, and there will be a link to my social media sites and also just old-fashioned email.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us
Thank
today,
you.
Jennifer.
Lori, it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for those who've watched us live and will watch on the replay as well later. Remember, as you go about the rest of your week, to find the things that are working within your life. You are the creator of your own story. What steps are you going to take next? Thank you, everyone, and have a beautiful rest of your week. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.